Columbus, Ohio, September 14, 2023. Jack Collins, a 42-year-old corporate manager, was found dead outside a downtown hotel during his high school reunion weekend. His wife, Olivia Collins, a dedicated schoolteacher, was the one who called for help, claiming he had suffered a tragic fall. But as investigators began piecing together the events leading up to Jack's death, troubling details emerged. Olivia and Jack Collins had spent more than 20 years building a life together. Their marriage was solid, predictable, and, to most people, enviable. They had a beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, fulfilling careers, and a comfortable routine. Olivia, a dedicated schoolteacher, found joy in her work but often felt that her life lacked excitement. Jack, a corporate manager, was successful and hardworking, but his long hours and frequent business trips left Olivia feeling disconnected. Over time, their relationship had become more about practicality than passion, and although Olivia loved Jack, she couldn't help but feel like something was missing. Lately, Jack had been unusually upbeat. He was talking more about his upcoming high school reunion, reminiscing about the good old days, with a newfound enthusiasm that Olivia hadn't seen in years. At first, she thought it was harmless. Everyone enjoyed a little nostalgia. But then came the changes. Jack, who had never cared much about his appearance, suddenly started working out, buying new clothes, and spending extra time in front of the mirror before leaving for work. Olivia watched these changes with growing curiosity and, soon, suspicion. It wasn't just the clothes or the gym. Jack's phone became a near-constant companion, always within reach, and he seemed to be texting more than usual. He would glance at his screen, smile subtly, then put it down when Olivia walked by. Whenever she asked who he was talking to, his answers were vague. "Just work," he'd say, brushing it off with a quick kiss on the cheek. Olivia tried to ignore the nagging feeling in her gut. After all, she had no real reason to suspect anything. People got excited about reunions. They wanted to look their best. But the signs kept piling up. Jack's late-night work calls, his sudden interest in social media, and his reluctance to talk about the reunion in detail made Olivia uneasy. She began to wonder if there was something, or someone, behind his renewed energy. One evening, Olivia decided to do some cleaning in the attic. It was a task she had been putting off for months, and with Jack at the gym, it seemed like the perfect time. As she sifted through old boxes of holiday decorations and childhood memorabilia, she stumbled upon a stack of Jack's belongings from high school. She smiled as she flipped through the dusty yearbooks, seeing pictures of him with his friends, sporting an old Letterman jacket and a grin she hadn't seen in years. Then something caught her eye. A worn-out yearbook had a small sticky note peeking out from between its pages. Curious, she opened it to the marked spot and found herself staring at a picture of Sophia Marshall, Jack's high school girlfriend. Next to her photo was a handwritten note that read, "Always wondered what could have been." Olivia's heart sank. The casual way the note was written felt intimate, almost wistful. She stared at the words, her mind racing with questions. Had Jack been thinking about Sophia all these years? Was this why he was suddenly so eager for the reunion? Holding the book in her hands, Olivia felt a wave of doubt creep in. Later that evening, when Jack returned home, Olivia casually placed the yearbook on the kitchen counter. "Found this while cleaning out the attic," she said, watching his reaction closely. Jack picked it up, flipping through the pages with a chuckle. "Wow, I haven't seen this in years," he said, his voice light. But when his eyes landed on the bookmarked page, his expression shifted for just a fraction of a second, enough for Olivia to notice. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to the note. Jack shrugged and let out a short laugh. "Oh, that? It's nothing. Just an old memory." He quickly closed the book and set it aside. "You're not jealous of high school, are you?" he teased, giving her a playful nudge. Olivia forced a smile, but inside, she felt anything but reassured. His reaction was too casual, too dismissive. Over the years, she had learned to read Jack like a book, and something about the way he avoided eye contact told her he wasn't being completely honest. In the days that followed, Olivia found herself watching Jack more closely than ever. She noticed how he lingered a little too long on social media, how his workouts were getting longer, and how his answers about the reunion grew shorter. She tried to push away her insecurities, reminding herself that they had built a life together, one built on trust and commitment. But doubt was a persistent whisper that she couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Olivia found a receipt tucked into the pocket of Jack's jeans. It was for a high-end men's clothing store, showing purchases far beyond what Jack usually spent on himself. A tailored suit, designer shoes, and cologne, items he hadn't mentioned buying. Olivia's stomach twisted as she realized Jack wasn't just trying to impress old friends. He was trying to impress someone specific. Her suspicions continued to grow when Jack started mentioning Sophia more often in casual conversation. He'd laugh about their old memories, about how they used to drive around town with no destination, and about how much fun they had back in the day. Olivia smiled and nodded, but deep down, she felt a storm brewing. A few nights later, unable to shake her growing doubts, Olivia decided to do something she had never done before. She checked Jack's phone while he was in the shower. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through his messages, but she found nothing incriminating. Still, the empty call logs and deleted messages only made her more suspicious. Jack was being careful, and that scared her more than anything. As the reunion approached, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Jack seemed more distant than ever, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that could change everything. She debated whether to bring up her concerns again, but the fear of being labeled paranoid held her back. The night before the reunion, Jack packed his suitcase with unusual care, selecting clothes he hadn't worn in years and double-checking his grooming products. Olivia watched silently from the doorway, her heart heavy with questions she didn't dare ask. As they lay in bed that night, Jack scrolled through his phone one last time before turning off the light. Olivia stared at the ceiling, the words from the yearbook replaying in her mind. Always wondered what could have been. Was it just innocent nostalgia? Or was Jack chasing something he should have left in the past? Olivia closed her eyes, knowing that soon, she would have her answer. Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Ever since finding the note in Jack's yearbook, she had been paying closer attention to the little things she used to overlook. And now, the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. Jack had started working late more often than usual, coming home hours after the office closed with vague excuses about meetings and project deadlines. His phone, which once sat on the counter or coffee table without a second thought, was now constantly in his pocket or face down on the nightstand. At first, Olivia tried to brush it off, telling herself she was just being paranoid. After all, they had been married for years, and Jack had always been dependable. But the tension between them had grown, creeping into their conversations in subtle but unmistakable ways. Whenever she brought up the reunion, Jack's tone would shift. He would become distant, giving short, clipped answers and quickly changing the subject. One evening, as Olivia set the table for dinner, she casually mentioned the reunion again. "So, have you decided if we're driving up together?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Jack barely looked up from his phone. "I haven't figured out my schedule yet," he muttered, tapping away at something. Olivia set the plates down a little harder than necessary. "It's just a weekend, Jack. How complicated can it be?" His eyes flickered with irritation, and for a moment, she saw something in his expression she didn't recognize. "I told you, it's just an innocent gathering. Don't make a big deal out of it." That was enough to confirm her suspicions. Jack was hiding something, and Olivia wasn't about to ignore it any longer. Later that week, Olivia met her best friend Mary for coffee at their usual spot. Mary had always been her sounding board, the person she could turn to when life got complicated. Sitting across from her now, Olivia hesitated before speaking, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I think Jack's keeping something from me," she finally admitted. Mary raised an eyebrow. "Jack? Come on, Olivia. You know how he gets about stuff like this." "It's probably just nostalgia hitting him hard," Olivia sighed, frustrated that even Mary didn't see what she was seeing. "It's not just the reunion. He's acting weird. He's been working late, hiding his phone, and avoiding talking about it." She paused, feeling the weight of her own words. "And I found an old yearbook with a note about his high school girlfriend." Mary leaned back in her chair, considering. "That doesn't mean he's cheating, Em. Maybe he's just feeling old and wants to relive his youth a little." Olivia wanted to believe that, but deep down, she knew better. I don't know, Mary. Something feels off. Mary patted her hand reassuringly. Just talk to him. Don't jump to conclusions. Olivia nodded, but in her heart, she knew talking wouldn't get her the answers she needed. She had to find out the truth for herself. That night, while Jack was in the shower, Olivia sat on the couch scrolling through emails on their shared laptop. She wasn't looking for anything specific, just clues. As she flipped through his inbox, something caught her eye, an email confirmation for a hotel booking. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The reservation was for the weekend of the reunion, at a high-end hotel she knew they couldn't afford on a whim. And Jack hadn't mentioned a word about it. The air seemed to leave the room as she stared at the screen, reading over the details again and again. It wasn't a business trip. It wasn't something harmless. It was deliberate. Olivia closed the laptop, her hands trembling slightly. She felt a mix of anger, hurt, and a deep, sinking feeling of inevitability. Confronting Jack right now wouldn't get her anywhere. He'd deny it, just like he always did. No, she needed to be smarter about this. Later that evening, she approached Jack casually as he watched TV. So, I was thinking, she said, keeping her voice light, I should come with you to the reunion. It might be fun to see all your old friends. Jack's face stiffened for just a second before he recovered. I don't think you'd have much fun, Em. It's mostly going to be boring small talk. Olivia forced a smile. Oh, come on. I could use a break from work, and it might be nice to get away together. He hesitated, and that hesitation was all Olivia needed. I guess, he said finally, trying to act indifferent. If you really want to. Olivia nodded, feeling a mix of satisfaction and dread. She would go with him. She would watch his every move. And she would finally get the answers she needed. Olivia and Jack arrived at the grand entrance of the high-end hotel hosting the reunion, the polished marble floors reflecting the soft glow of the chandeliers above. The place was buzzing with energy, old friends reuniting, laughter echoing through the hallways, and the hum of conversation filling the air. Olivia smiled tightly as she walked alongside Jack, who looked more excited than she'd seen him in years. He had been unusually eager about this reunion, and now, watching him scan the crowd with anticipation, Olivia couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Jack squeezed her hand absent-mindedly, his eyes darting across the room. Wow, look at this place, he murmured. It's like we never left. Olivia nodded, forcing a smile. It's nice, she said, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Jack's excitement than just nostalgia. As they stepped into the ballroom, the atmosphere felt overwhelming. The space was elegantly decorated, with round tables draped in crisp white linens and a live band playing softly in the background. Clusters of people stood in small groups, reminiscing and sharing stories of their youth. Olivia took in the scene, but her focus remained on Jack. She saw the way his eyes searched the crowd, and then, suddenly, they landed on someone. Sophia Marshall. Olivia had heard the name often enough over the years, always mentioned casually in passing. But now, seeing Sophia in person, she understood why Jack had been so eager to come tonight. Sophia stood near the bar, effortlessly beautiful in a fitted black dress, her blonde hair cascading down her back in perfect waves. She carried herself with confidence, and Olivia could see the way Jack's posture shifted, how his grip on her hand loosened ever so slightly. Jack cleared his throat and turned to Olivia. I'm going to grab a drink. Want anything? Olivia hesitated, sensing the eagerness in his voice, but she nodded. Just some water. Before she could say another word, Jack had already made his way toward the bar. Olivia followed him with her eyes, watching as he approached Sophia with a smile that seemed too warm, too familiar. The way they greeted each other, with an ease that suggested they had been in touch long before tonight, made Olivia's stomach churn. For the next hour, Olivia tried to focus on mingling with Jack's classmates, nodding and smiling at conversations she wasn't really listening to. But her mind kept drifting back to Jack and Sophia. She saw the way they stood close together, the way Sophia laughed at his jokes, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Jack had a certain energy about him, a spark that Olivia hadn't seen in years, and it stung to realize it wasn't because of her. Olivia watched as Jack leaned in, whispering something into Sophia's ear, and Sophia threw her head back with laughter. The ease between them was undeniable, and Olivia felt like an outsider in her own marriage. She sipped her drink slowly, trying to calm the growing knot in her stomach. At one point, Olivia found herself in a conversation with an old classmate of Jack's, a woman named Rachel who seemed to know everyone. As Rachel talked about the good old days, Olivia seized the opportunity. "Sophia Marshall," she said casually. "Jack's mentioned her a few times. They were close, right?" Rachel's eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh, Sophia? Yeah, they were inseparable back in the day. Everyone thought they'd end up together. They had this connection, you know?" Olivia's grip tightened around her glass. "Yeah," she said softly, "I've noticed." As the night wore on, Olivia grew more and more restless. She tried to convince herself that she was overreacting, that Jack was just catching up with an old friend. But the looks they exchanged, the way Sophia touched his arm, the hushed tones of their conversations, none of it felt innocent. At one point, Jack excused himself from the group and disappeared into the crowd. Olivia's eyes followed him as he weaved through the ballroom, eventually slipping out through the side door leading to the hotel's lounge area. Sophia was right behind him. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she followed them at a distance, careful to stay out of sight. She made her way down the hallway and stopped just outside the entrance to the hotel bar. Peering inside, she saw them sitting together in a corner booth, their heads close, their voices low. She could only hear bits and pieces of their conversation, but what she caught was enough. "I've missed this," Sophia said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. Jack sighed. "Me too. I've thought about it a lot." Olivia's throat tightened. She felt her pulse quicken as she pressed herself against the wall, listening. Sophia leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't have to stop, you know. No one has to find out." Jack didn't respond right away, but when he did, it was with a hesitation that made Olivia's stomach drop. "It's complicated." Olivia couldn't listen anymore. She turned and walked back to the ballroom, her hands shaking, her heart pounding in her chest. Her worst fears had just been confirmed, and she had no idea what to do next. For the rest of the night, she avoided Jack, keeping her distance and observing him from across the room. He laughed, danced, and enjoyed himself as if nothing was wrong, while Olivia felt like her entire world was slowly crumbling around her. Later, when Jack finally came to find her, he was all smiles. "Hey, where've you been? I've been looking for you." Olivia forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness rising in her throat. "Just catching up with people," she said, hoping he couldn't hear the strain in her voice. Jack nodded, oblivious to the turmoil inside her. "You ready to head back to the room?" Olivia nodded, but she knew things would never be the same. Olivia sat stiffly on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at Jack as he moved around the room with deliberate ease. He was avoiding her gaze, focusing on little things, adjusting his tie, checking his watch, smoothing down his shirt. It was a pattern she had grown familiar with over the years. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, Olivia couldn't push aside the nagging feeling that had been gnawing at her for weeks. She took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady. "I saw you with Sophia." Jack glanced at her, his expression carefully neutral. "Yeah, we talked. It's a reunion, Em. That's what people do." He shrugged, acting as if the tension in the room didn't exist. Olivia clenched her hands in her lap. "You weren't just talking, Jack. You were sitting in a booth, leaning in close, laughing, like it was more than just catching up." Jack let out a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Olivia, you're reading too much into this. Sophia and I go way back. We were just reminiscing. It's harmless." Olivia studied him closely, the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot, the slight edge creeping into his voice. "Then why didn't you tell me you booked this hotel room weeks ago?" Jack's entire body stiffened. It was a fraction of a second, but Olivia caught it. His eyes darted to the bedside table where his phone rested before quickly returning to her. "I booked it last minute," he said, too casually. "Figured it'd be easier than driving back home late." Olivia reached for her phone and pulled up the email she had found earlier. "This says otherwise, Jack. You made the reservation over a month ago." Jack's expression hardened. I didn't think it mattered. Olivia stood up, her voice sharper now. You didn't think it mattered? You're hiding things from me, Jack. The hotel, the way you've been acting, and then I find your yearbook with a note about Sophia? How am I supposed to believe this is all just harmless? Jack rolled his eyes, frustration bubbling to the surface. That note is decades old, Olivia. It's nothing. Just some stupid memory. Olivia shook her head. Then why were you so eager to see her? Why all the secrecy? Jack's jaw clenched. Because I knew you'd do this, he snapped. You're always looking for problems where there aren't any. God, Olivia, I work hard for us, and this is the thanks I get? You don't trust me at all. Olivia crossed her arms, her chest tightening. Can you really blame me? Jack grabbed his jacket from the chair and headed toward the door. I need some air. He was gone before Olivia could say another word. The door closed behind him with a dull thud, leaving Olivia standing alone in the middle of the room, staring at the empty space where he had been. She sank back down onto the bed, her mind racing. For weeks, she had been convincing herself that she was overreacting, that she was reading too much into things. But now, the pieces were falling into place, and there was no denying it any longer. Jack was hiding something, and Olivia had to know the truth. Her eyes drifted toward his phone, sitting on the nightstand. It was locked, but she knew his passcode. He was predictable like that. With trembling fingers, she picked it up and entered the familiar 4-digit code. The screen unlocked instantly, and Olivia felt a mixture of relief and dread. Opening his messages, she scrolled until she found Sophia's name. Her stomach twisted as she read through the thread. Tonight can't come soon enough. I can't wait to finally have you all to myself. You looked amazing earlier. Just like I remembered. Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. There it was, proof. Proof that she wasn't imagining things. Proof that Jack had been lying to her face. She swallowed hard, scrolling further. The messages stretched back weeks, filled with inside jokes, affectionate remarks, and plans to meet in secret. Her grip tightened on the phone as anger simmered beneath the surface. She had been made to feel paranoid, insecure, and unreasonable, all while Jack had been sneaking around behind her back. She placed the phone back on the nightstand, staring at it as if it held all the answers she had been searching for. Minutes passed, but she didn't move. Her mind replayed the last few months, the late nights at work, the gym sessions, the sudden interest in his appearance. It all made sense now. When the door finally opened again, Jack walked in, his face carefully blank. You still upset? He asked, as if nothing had happened. Olivia stood up slowly, meeting his gaze head-on. I know. Jack frowned. Know what? Olivia gestured to the nightstand. I checked your phone. For a moment, Jack didn't react. Then his face darkened. Olivia, you had no right to do that. She laughed bitterly. And you had no right to lie to me. Jack exhaled sharply. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Olivia cut him off. You've been sneaking around with Sophia. You lied to me over and over again. And you let me sit here questioning my sanity while you ran around behind my back. Jack opened his mouth to respond but closed it again, looking away. Olivia's voice softened, exhaustion seeping into her tone. Why, Jack? He shook his head, his jaw tightening. I didn't mean for it to happen. Olivia felt a tear slide down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. You need to leave. Jack blinked. Olivia, come on. No, she interrupted firmly. Go be with Sophia. That's what you want, isn't it? Jack hesitated, searching her face for any sign of forgiveness, but he found none. With a heavy sigh, he grabbed his jacket once more and left the room, this time without another word. Olivia sank back onto the bed, the weight of the evening pressing down on her. She stared at the ceiling, wondering how everything had come to this. The reunion was supposed to be a trip down memory lane, but instead, it had exposed cracks in their marriage that could never be repaired. And now, for the first time in years, Olivia was left with a terrifying realization. She was alone. Olivia sat on the hotel bed, staring blankly at the wall. Her hands trembled slightly as she replayed the conversation in her head, the weight of Jack's lies pressing down on her chest. The messages on his phone had confirmed everything she feared, yet a small part of her had still clung to the hope that there was some other explanation. Now, that hope was gone, replaced by a deep, burning anger. She wondered how long it had been going on. How many times she had ignored the late nights, the vague excuses, the way Jack had slowly drifted away from her. Had she really been so blind? Or had she simply chosen not to see it? The thought made her stomach turn. For years, she had been the dutiful wife, supporting him through everything, never once doubting his loyalty. And now, here she was, sitting in a cold hotel room while he was off with another woman, their history reduced to nothing but a distant memory. Hours passed, and Olivia remained in the same spot, barely moving. She wasn't sure how long she had been sitting there when she finally heard the door creak open. Jack walked in, his hair slightly disheveled, the faint smell of alcohol clinging to him. He paused in the doorway, avoiding her gaze as he tossed his jacket onto a chair. "You're still up," he muttered, his voice laced with exhaustion and something else. Guilt, perhaps? Olivia took a deep breath, her voice surprisingly steady. "Where were you?" Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. "I told you, I needed some air." Olivia stood up slowly, holding his phone in her hand. "And did you need to text Sophia while you were getting some air?" Jack's eyes widened slightly before narrowing. "Olivia, don't start." She cut him off, stepping closer. "No, Jack. I'm done pretending. I saw the messages. I know everything." Jack exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. It's not what you think." Olivia let out a hollow laugh. "Not what I think. You told her you couldn't wait to see her, that you missed her. Don't lie to me, Jack." For a moment, Jack said nothing. Then, finally, he looked at her, his face tired and defeated. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. It happened." Olivia felt something inside her snap. "It didn't just happen, Jack. You made choices. You lied to me. You planned this." Jack dropped onto the chair, resting his elbows on his knees. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia folded her arms, the weight of his words pressing down on her. "How long?" Jack hesitated, then sighed. "A few months." Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded slowly. "I need some air," she said, grabbing her coat and walking past him without another word. The night air hit her like a wave as she stepped outside the hotel. The grounds were quiet, with only the distant hum of cars passing by on the nearby highway. She wandered aimlessly, her thoughts racing. The betrayal, the lies, the humiliation. It was all too much. How had her life come to this? She found herself walking towards the small garden area behind the hotel, a secluded space lit by dim pathway lights. The cool breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass, but it did little to calm her nerves. Olivia leaned against a bench, staring at the ground, trying to collect herself. And then, she heard his voice. Jack's voice, just a few feet away, low but clear. Olivia's heart pounded as she followed the sound, stepping carefully behind a row of hedges. I know, Jack was saying into his phone, his tone exasperated but affectionate. "I just need to get through this weekend, then I'll figure everything out." Olivia's stomach dropped. She pressed closer, listening intently. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. She's just being emotional as usual," Jack continued. "I'll tell her after we get home. I promise. Just give me some time." Olivia's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Every word felt like a slap in the face. "I love you too, Sophia," Jack whispered. "I can't wait to finally be with you." Tears stung Olivia's eyes, but the anger burned hotter. She turned and walked away before she could hear more, her entire body trembling. The betrayal she had felt before was nothing compared to this moment. He wasn't just having an affair. He was planning to leave her, to replace her like she was nothing. By the time she reached the hotel entrance, she had made up her mind. She couldn't stay here, not with him. She had spent too long being the loyal, trusting wife, and now it was time to take control of her own life. Olivia took the elevator back to their room, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't contain. When she stepped inside, Jack looked up from where he sat on the edge of the bed, his face weary. Olivia, Save it, she snapped, holding up a hand. I know everything, Jack. I heard you on the phone with her. Jack's face paled. You heard? Olivia nodded, her voice cold. Yeah, so don't bother with any more lies. I hope she's worth it. Jack stood up, moving toward her. Olivia, please. Let's talk about this. She stepped back, shaking her head. There's nothing left to talk about. Jack looked desperate now. I didn't mean for you to find out like this. Olivia let out a bitter laugh. Right. You were planning to tell me after the reunion, right? Once you were sure I'd be out of the picture? Jack didn't respond. He didn't have to. Olivia grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm done, Jack. You can have your perfect little life with Sophia. I'm out. Jack reached for her arm, but she pulled away sharply. Don't touch me, she said, her voice trembling with rage. She walked out, leaving Jack standing alone in the middle of the room. As she made her way down the hall, tears streamed down her face, but she held her head high. This time, she was the one walking away. Olivia pushed open the door to their hotel room, her hands trembling as she set her purse down on the dresser. Her chest felt tight, her head pounding from the whirlwind of emotions she had been trying to process. She had walked around the hotel grounds for hours, hoping the cool night air would help her think clearly. But instead, it only fueled the storm of anger and betrayal swirling inside her. Every word she had overheard from Jack's phone call replayed in her mind, making it impossible to feel anything other than rage. She paced the room for a few minutes, running through all the possible ways this night could end. Sitting here and waiting for Jack to come back was no longer an option. She needed answers, not just from him, but from Sophia. Grabbing her room key, Olivia left and headed downstairs, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floors of the hotel lobby. The crowd from the reunion had thinned out, leaving only a few lingering guests enjoying drinks at the bar or chatting in small groups. And there, sitting alone at a dimly lit table near the window, was Sophia. Olivia's pulse quickened as she approached. Sophia looked up from her phone, her lips curling into a smirk the moment she saw Olivia. Well, Sophia said, crossing her arms. Did Jack finally tell you the truth, or did you have to figure it out all on your own? Olivia's jaw tightened. You don't look surprised. Sophia shrugged, leaning back in her chair. Why would I be? Jack and we go way back. This was inevitable. Olivia's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You had no right to come between us. Sophia chuckled softly, shaking her head. Come on, Olivia. We both know Jack was never really happy with you. He just didn't have the guts to admit it. Olivia's face burned with anger. You're pathetic. You think you can just walk into our lives and take everything we've built? Sophia's expression remained smug. I didn't take anything, Olivia. Jack came to me. And let's be honest, you've been holding him back for years. You're too boring, too predictable. Olivia felt something inside her snap. You don't know anything about our marriage. Sophia's smile faded slightly, her eyes narrowing. I know enough. I know Jack's tired of the same old routine. I know he wants more. And I know I can give him that. Olivia took a step closer, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. You think this is love? You're just another distraction for him. Sophia rolled her eyes. Believe what you want. But Jack and I are moving on, without you. Before Olivia could respond, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned to see Jack walking toward them, his face set in a grim expression. What's going on here? He asked, looking between the two women. Olivia stared at him, the anger she had been holding back finally boiling over. Jack, do you hear what she's saying? Do you even care how much you've hurt me? Jack sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. Olivia, I told you earlier. This marriage, it's not working. We both know it. Olivia felt the sting of his words like a slap to the face. You've already made up your mind, haven't you? Jack looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe, but mostly indifference. I think it's for the best. Sophia smirked, standing up and placing a hand on Jack's arm. See? We're on the same page, Olivia. You should move on. Olivia's vision blurred with fury. You're disgusting, she spat, her voice trembling. Both of you. Jack's patience was wearing thin. Olivia, stop making a scene. We'll figure things out when we get back home. Olivia shook her head, taking a step back. There's nothing left to figure out. Without another word, she turned and stormed out of the lobby, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. She didn't stop until she reached the quiet of the hotel parking lot, where she leaned against a lamppost, breathing heavily. Humiliation burned deep within her, but it was quickly being overtaken by something darker. The betrayal, the lies, the way they had dismissed her like she was nothing. It was too much to bear. Olivia wiped away a tear and stared up at the hotel, her thoughts racing. Jack and Sophia thought they had one. They thought they could just erase her, move on without a second thought. But Olivia wasn't ready to let them have that satisfaction. As she stood there in the cool night air, her anger hardened into something more dangerous. She wasn't sure what she was going to do next, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let Jack walk away without consequences. Olivia sat at the hotel bar, staring blankly into her glass of wine, swirling the dark liquid slowly. The dim lighting and soft hum of conversation around her blurred into the background, leaving only the crushing weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. Every word Jack and Sophia had said echoed in her mind, replaying over and over like a cruel reminder of how little she meant to him. She had spent years building a life with Jack, standing by him through every challenge, only to be tossed aside like an afterthought. The humiliation stung more than anything. The way Sophia had smirked at her, the way Jack had so casually dismissed their marriage as if it had never mattered. Olivia took another sip of wine, feeling the warmth spread through her, but doing little to numb the ache inside. A part of her knew she should walk away, pack her bags, and leave Jack to his new life with Sophia. But another part, one that she didn't want to acknowledge, refused to let go so easily. She wasn't just angry, she felt robbed. She had given everything to this marriage, and now she was supposed to just disappear quietly? No, not tonight. Her fingers tightened around the glass as she watched the elevator doors across the lobby open, and Jack stepped out. He didn't see her sitting in the shadows of the bar. He walked briskly, his shoulders relaxed, without a care in the world. Olivia felt a surge of rage pulse through her veins. He didn't look heartbroken. He looked free. She watched as he made his way toward their room, fumbling with the keycard and slipping inside. Olivia set her drink down and stood up slowly. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was feeling, and every feeling told her she needed to face him one last time. Walking down the hall, her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step building with intensity. When she reached their room, she didn't hesitate. The door wasn't fully latched, and with a gentle push, it creaked open. Jack was inside, standing near the dresser, loosening his tie with a sigh. He didn't even flinch when he saw her. "Olivia," he said tiredly, "what are you doing here?" Olivia stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I need to talk," she said, her voice surprisingly calm despite the storm brewing inside her. Jack rubbed his face. "We've talked enough tonight. Just go to bed, Olivia. We'll figure everything out in the morning." Olivia shook her head. "No, we won't. There's nothing to figure out, Jack. You've made your decision, haven't you?" Jack sighed, his eyes avoiding hers. "Olivia, I didn't want it to happen this way, but it's done." The casual way he said it, as if their years together meant nothing, made something snap inside her. "You don't even care, do you?" Jack finally looked at her, annoyance flashing in his eyes. "Of course I care, Olivia, but this marriage hasn't worked in years. You know that." Olivia took a step closer, her voice shaking. "I gave you everything, Jack, and you just, what? Decide I'm not good enough anymore? That Sophia is better?" Jack exhaled sharply. "Olivia, don't do this. It's not just about Sophia. We weren't happy. You always wanted more from me, and I couldn't give it to you." Olivia's fists clenched at her sides. "You couldn't, or you wouldn't?" Jack rolled his eyes. "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're always pushing, always making me feel like I'm not enough." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. I was trying to make us better, Jack. You were the one who gave up. Jack threw his tie onto the dresser and turned away. Maybe I did. And maybe it was the best decision I ever made. Olivia's vision blurred with tears, but the anger inside her burned hotter. You're a coward, she whispered. Jack turned back toward her, his face hardening. And you're impossible to please, Olivia. Before she even realized it, Olivia stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Jack moved back, his foot catching on the edge of the balcony railing. His eyes met hers for a brief moment before he lost his footing and disappeared from view. A sickening crash echoed from below, followed by eerie silence. Olivia stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest. She gripped the railing and peered down, her breath catching in her throat as she saw Jack lying motionless on the pavement far below. Her hands trembled violently as reality set in. Jack, she whispered, though she knew there would be no response. Panic surged through her veins. This wasn't supposed to happen. It had been an argument, nothing more. She hadn't meant to, had she? Her mind raced, grasping for a way out. She couldn't let this destroy her life. People knew they were having marital problems. Everyone would suspect her first. Olivia staggered back into the hotel room, her eyes darting around for anything that could explain what had just happened. She pulled Jack's shoes from the closet and placed them near the balcony door, positioning them as if he had been standing too close to the edge. She knocked over a chair and scattered a few belongings to make it seem like an accident, an unfortunate misstep in the middle of the night. Her hands shook as she reached for the hotel phone, forcing panic into her voice. Please, send help, she gasped. My husband. He fell from the balcony. I think, her voice broke. I think he's dead. The hotel staff arrived within minutes, paramedics rushing past her to reach Jack. Olivia stood by the door, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face. It happened so fast, she stammered, barely able to keep herself composed. He lost his balance. As investigators combed the scene, questions began to pile up. Witnesses from the neighboring rooms reported hearing raised voices just before the fall, and security footage revealed Olivia following Jack onto the balcony moments before the incident. Forensic experts soon determined that the positioning of Jack's injuries didn't align with a simple, accidental fall. Olivia was questioned, her shaky explanations filled with inconsistencies. Her carefully constructed story began to crumble under pressure, and within days, the truth started to surface. Eventually, the mounting evidence led to her arrest, shattering the illusion of an unfortunate accident. At trial, prosecutors presented evidence showing Olivia's escalating frustration leading up to the incident. The defense argued it was an accident, but the jury found her guilty. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 years.